The Ukraine war continues to rage on, and all the while, you might have heard some anti-war people over the last few years argue that it is a lost cause for Ukraine and they ought to just lay down and stop fighting. Just capitulate to Putin. Those people are all Russian sympathizers. They want Russia to win. The fact is that Russia is wasting immense amounts of resources, lives, and money on this war, and it is up to the Ukrainians to just not lose. They win by not losing for long enough. It's as simple as that, and many wars have been won against much stronger asymmetrical powers in the past through that exact method. This is nothing new. And that's why it shouldn't surprise you that the news coming out of Ukraine and Moscow is very good if you're a decent human being who is supporting the Ukrainians. I actually have a video here from my favorite on-the-ground Ukrainian journalist, or he's not Ukrainian, but Ukraine journalist, Dylan Burns. He just uploaded a video yesterday on Ukraine's attack in Moscow, the biggest since World War II. Of course, we're going to get plenty of footage of that really iconic burning Moscow skyline as well, so we'll get the whole story behind it. Dylan's going to break it down for us real good. He knows his stuff. He's an on-the-ground in Ukraine journalist. Like, he's been literally in the trenches.
Different than it did at the start of the full-scale invasion.
Link to his video down
from
below.
Every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And this is that equal and opposite reaction. This was the largest air attack on Russia since the Second World War, eclipsing every previous Ukrainian air attack that has been done. And much of that air attack was concentrated around the Moscow area, meaning that before, when you would have air attacks that were concentrated on oil refineries that might have been past Moscow or might have been, closer to...
God, look at that footage, dude. It's like Mordor. It really is like Mordor. It's like that one shot where Sam and Frodo are looking out at at the cliffs, and they can just see the rising smoke and fire, and it's just ominous. They literally turned Moscow into Mordor. Now, I assume it's not burnt down and turned into just blackened rubble, but, that is still quite the sight.
To Ukraine, or ammo storage facilities, some electronics components factories, or military factories. This was concentrated on many of those same targets, largely oil refineries, which is why you see such large black plumes of smoke like you do here. But
I saw the cope from the Russian accounts was that the Ukrainians had loaded up their drones with fuel so that when the Russians shot them down, it would make a big fire and it would look like the drone had done a lot of damage. Think for a moment about how massive that cope is. That the Ukrainians loaded their drones with gasoline such that when they're shot down, they would make a fake fire that would do fake damage. Dog, if you shoot down a gasoline-filled drone and it makes fires like this, it's going to burn down the city. Okay, these are not fake fires. This is not fake damage. And for one, not only was it wasn't even that. These are burning fuel refineries. That's why it's making so much fire and smoke. So yeah, the Z-Cope has been very funny.
On top of those attacks on these oil refineries, it was concentrated around the Moscow area, meaning not the first time, but for the largest scale and on, I would say, the largest impact, the amount of targets hit, the amount of smoke created, the amount that people heard the sounds during the daytime, the amount people saw drones and missiles flying between and over their buildings, the amount of social and psychological impact, it was bigger. On the actual size of the attack, it was bigger. And this is probably the most damage that has been done and seen by Russians of the entirety of the war.
Man, I still think about the fact that Hassan called Dylan Burns a tourist or war tourist pervert because Dylan had allowed a few Ukrainians who took issue with some Russian talking points that Hassan had repeated, made a video debunking them and responding to them. Then Hassan's chat was like, you should watch that video. You should watch the Dylan Burns video. And Hassan went on a rant calling Dylan Burns a pervert war tourist because Dylan Burns actually has the balls to go to Ukraine. So, still think about that. Still think about that daily.
And there are so many different clips of this that I can show you where you can see Russian air defense systems doing their best to try to stop these drones as they fly right on past their interceptors. Sometimes they intercept, and there have been videos of that. Many other times, they did not.
That's the shot. That's the shot where they blew the top right off of the refinery tank.
That right there is probably going to be one of the most famous images of the war. I mean that.
Yeah.
One of the most famous images of
that mushroom cloud. It's literally like a picture perfect mini nuke explosion from Fallout 4. Like when you fire a mini nuke and it's just that like mini perfect mushroom cloud the size of a building. That is exactly what that
The
was.
most famous images of the war. I mean that. One of the most famous images of the
Looks
war.
exactly
That
like it.
mushroom cloud that launches the top of that container into the air around this oil facility. I mean, that is incredible to see that. I mean, look how many civilian apartment blocks are around this facility that can watch this and looking
Cinema.
outside their window, recording on their phones, how this is getting shared all over Telegram, all over Russian socials. And no matter what channel you turn to, whether you're looking on social media, looking outside your window, this is the war. It's also particularly interesting because the Moscow region is one of the most supportive, if not the most supportive region in all of Russia of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, landing shots on Moscow, that's about as... I mean, Kyiv gets bombed by Russia a fair amount, but, like, the idea that Ukraine can land blows on Moscow, that's a bad look. The fact that Ukraine can stop so many strikes on their capital, and yet Ukraine can make any strike on Russia's, is such a bad look for Russia. There is a reason this story has, to some extent, reignited attention on the Ukraine war, because I think a lot of people are realizing, wait, the Ukrainians are still, they're not just holding out, they're actually like making moves. Oh shit. The fact is, the Ukrainians, you could argue, in a sense, are winning. Russia can't do this forever. As long as the Ukrainians don't give up, they will win. And that is why the Ukrainians should just quit, it's a lost cause mindset, is almost always coming from a Russian bot or a Russian sympathizer, Russian propagandist, or a well-meaning anti-war person who's just not very educated on the situation, who's fallen for the nonsense propaganda that Ukrainians want to stop fighting. I've heard mostly Trump supporters claim that one.
Absolutely terrifying, as war is. And you know, this is an example of the war coming home. Terrible for
the forever war is a fallacy and it's not forever. Yeah, forever wars, like, that's the funny thing. America gets shit for forever wars, but the reason why they're forever wars is because America's losing. Like, Iran would have been a forever war if Trump didn't just finally accept defeat, right? Like they would have just held out forever while the US wasted money, resources, and lives trying to get something out of Iran. All the while, Iran, from its cozy little spot, keeps oil locked down and, fucks over all of our economies, And meanwhile, we're just spending more and more money on war. Like, these forever wars aren't necessarily just bad US policy. These forever wars are how you do asymmetric warfare on that large of a scale. That's how a smaller, weaker country holds out against an empire and, in the end, maintains its sovereignty. You just don't lose for as long as possible.
The civilians,
Objective
whether
survive.
or not it will bring about an end to the war through the Russian war machine being undermined through these types of strikes, through support for the war being undermined by these types of strikes, we have yet to wait and see. But the general economic forces for Russia does not trend in a positive direction when the machines that prop up its economy look like this and their people are talking like this. We effed around and found out. This translation was done by Visigrad24. Not a great primary source I'll put out there, but that's where the translation is from.
Здесь, видишь, все горит там, блядь. Весь завод разухуярили, весь, блядь.
Look at it burn. Look at it
Ракеты,
burn.
блядь, там долбят, блядь, еще где-то на подлете.
Like music to my
Да не было
ears.
здесь, как говорится, блядь. У нас самое лучшее ПВО, блядь. Хохлы тоже, сука, хитрые, блядь, при поддержке, блядь, пиндосов.
Yeah. We Yankees love supporting the Ukrainians. Stay mad about it, Zetard.
Ну, просто сплошное пожарище, блядь. Просто не видно на видео, там огонь вон. Да, блядь. Еще где-то въебал, блядь. Вот он, блядь.
Problem?
Еще, блядь. Я не знаю, сколько штук уже поприлетал, я уже штук 15 насчитал, блядь. Как началось, блядь. Пиздец, просто пиздец.
We just
We
fucked
effed
up. That's
the last
crazy.
word he says, but you hear a lot of sentiment.
That's real. That's real. I love how there are still so many people willing to argue Russia's not doing imperialism too. It's like, you've even got some of the Z-boys out there saying, okay, maybe we fucked up. The Ukrainians have hands, it turns out. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Expressed there that are interesting. See, this is a guy that is not, you know, Slava Ukraini, Heroem Slava, right? This is a guy who's using slurs for Ukrainians when he's describing this attack, but you hear him saying, we effed up. And you start hearing like comments, like sarcastic comments about Russia's greatest air defense systems in the world, when he can look out of his window and, I mean, it looks like Mordor outside and just like the sky is darkening. When it started to get darker, I mean, that combined with the smoke clouds, it created a hellish image, especially when the fires were still lapping up. You can hear him express that, like, well, on the camera, you can't even see the fires all that well. And on the right side, you can see the fires lapping up so high that they're reaching above the buildings. Hey, either way, like, this is quite incredible damage, but it also...
Once again, you got to imagine the Russian ego, the fronting of invincibility, can't necessarily be good for them when they can't admit that anything can be improved, anything could be better, or there are any actual gaps in their defenses, because they have to front infinite strength, and they have to front infinite weakness from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can't ever be a real threat, and Russia can never be in any real danger, but that also means they can't realistically, proactively account for problems like this, or like risks of things like this happening, which is, I think, quite funny. Because, you know, Russia's a fascist oligarchy, and they are very much repeating many of the common fascist points, which is they've identified the Ukrainians as an enemy, and they are both a weak and a strong enemy. So they're a threat to Russia in a very incoherent way. But they are also constantly stated to be weak and easy to crush. It's a classic tenet of fascism, the back and forth flip-flopping on whether or not your scapegoat is super pathetic or super scary.
Shows that if you are a Moscow resident, and again, the region that is the most supportive of the war, and you watch this happen, what type of conclusions could you get from this? Well, one could be you go and you read the Russian state press and newspapers, which even those will still have to express some concern here to show that they still live on planet Earth. But then you'll watch, you know, Solonyov Live, and you'll watch, you know, some other Russian state media programs, and you'll walk away and you'll say, well, this was terrible, but that shows exactly why we're fighting the war. It's to stop things like this from happening. Even
I think he's literally in a bunker right now, by the way. Like, he's got all those patches on his wall, which is fucking sick. But also, like, I think he's in a bunker that is, like, sound padded. But also, like, the padding is that, like, you know that, like, carpet material that you can also put on walls and it makes the walls, like, absorb sound? I think he's in a room like that underground. That's, like, the vibe I get from watching these. I think he said something about being underground in one of his videos. He might not be. I mean, I hope he's underground right now.
no, before the Russians invaded Ukraine, things like this were not happening. This is the largest air attack on Moscow
True.
since World War II. The common denominator here isn't that, oh my gosh, if we didn't invade Ukraine, then Moscow would be on fire. No, you invaded Ukraine, tried to light Kiev on fire, and that is why Moscow is on fire and Napoleon is long dead. That is why. And so it creates a difficult social dilemma on top of the economic pressure that is obvious with targeting Gazprom, Rosneft, and other Russian energy giants that help propel the war forward, both by funding the war effort directly through its contribution to Russian government coffers, but also through its direct contributions to the mercenary companies, the PMCs, that are attached to these companies, which again,
That was something I actually had Dylan on stream to talk about. The private military contractors that Russia has hired are fucking insane. And that's not even beginning to talk about... Fuck, it's not the Azov battalion. It's the... That's in Ukraine. It's the... What are they called? They're the group of ex-cons, mostly violent criminals that Putin basically set loose on Ukraine, and then they're the Wagner... No, not the Wagner group. Was it the Wagner group? Yeah, I think it might have been the Wagner group. You might be right about that. And how they, like, went from Ukraine back to Moscow with a military convoy planning to, like, strong-arm Putin into agreeing to their demands. It was some crazy shit that happened back then. Apparently Wagner has been incorporated into the official military. That wouldn't surprise me, but that like near military coup they tried to do, like just that was crazy. Covering that was wild. I thought we might see Putin hang. I thought it might finally fucking happen. I was getting excited. Wagner, yeah.
When you sanction these companies, you are not just sanctioning these direct companies that are financing the Russian government. You're sanctioning companies that are financing the Russian war machine. You're financing companies that directly, one point to another point, financing mercenary companies. Here is another clip of the damage where you can see both the smoke plumes rising in the distance from J of Kiev, big pro-Ukraine account that has edges.
Apparently the Wagner Group is just operating in Africa now. That makes sense. I think Russia and China are trying to be really present in Africa right now.
On every side, he posts the smoke plumes going up and some civilian buildings that looks like, at least from here, that have caught on fire.
Black-pilled Kiwi has donated $5. It's the perfect analogy. The most iconic picture of the war is an oil tank explosion triggered by a wayward air defense. Poetry.
That is true.
Yep.
If you actually go, and I didn't want to go into it.
It's their bad, like, anti-air that shot that thing. That was a missile that hit it, not a drone.
In detail, but if you go back and you actually see that one explosion of the refinery, and you see the oil, tank explosion, that wasn't caused by Ukrainian drone. Most of this damage was caused by Ukrainian drones. That was actually caused by a wayward air defense missile that slammed into the oil tanker and then.
That would never happen. Russian air defense missile is perfect. Ukrainian drones are garbage. We don't need to make better missile. We don't need better missile. You suggest we need better missile. You arguing Ukrainian is real threat. We literally we'll put you in prison for that. I'm not good at Russian accents. Hopefully that passes the bar.
Caused that explosion, even though many of the other oil tanker explosions were caused by drones and Ukrainian missiles. In this case, when you look at this building, we don't see if it was a wayward air defense missile. It is also a large possibility, as is often here, that both the jamming of the drone's systems, of its navigation systems, or direct interception of the drones, which there have been multiple visual confirmations of drones that were intercepted during this attack that have been shared online. I didn't gather every clip of this attack. Trust me, if I wanted to do that, I would have to have been doing that all day. But that has been confirmed as well. And then the wreckage slams in the building. That's possible as well. Drones, it can also miss. That is also a possibility. But you can see here what looks like also some civilian buildings that have caught on fire. As well, of course, the large fire being from the gigantic burning oil facilities in the background.
I'm always consistent on this. It's always really sad when any civilians get caught in the crossfire, but in the case of Israel bombing Gaza, for instance, or in the case of Russians bombing Kiev, they're not necessarily targeting civilians, but if they suspect that a civilian infrastructure full of civilians has any presence of the enemy, they will indiscriminately strike it and they don't give a fuck. So it's just that kind of behavior. It's easy to get on the I don't care if any civilians on this or that side get hurt when the other side has done such awful things. But I will say I've had one or two Russian fans in my chat. They're fully pro-Ukraine and they hate Putin. They're ashamed of what their country is doing. They're leftists and they're chatters of mine. They hang out in my chat or they watch my videos. Same goes for Israelis. I've got leftists, anti-Zionist Israelis that are in my chat. They didn't choose to be born in Israel. It's sad whenever it gets to the full-scale dehumanization, even despite whether or not you support the regime that you live under. Something that I think the Ukrainians have done a really good job of not participating in. I don't really see Ukrainians calling any Russians, say, an orc, for instance. It's specifically the ones who are anti-Ukrainian. If you're a sympathetic Russian, they're like, hey! That's what I've seen. Many, many times, that is what I have seen. Not exactly the case when it comes to, at least the online environment and Israelis who are not Zionists. I see them get just as much hate just for being Israeli. It's kind of sad. It's come on. Don't you want, people on the inside of Israel who can, have an impact? Maybe I'm crazy. Anyway, if you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and a comment down below. It really does help the channel out a ton, and I really do appreciate it. Of course, you can subscribe, see more from me. You can comment, follow my social medias, And if you want to go the extra mile and support me directly, financially, consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me in the same way over on YouTube. I really appreciate it. It helps a ton. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one.